Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. This is Some Christian Guy, and today I'm going to be talking about an article that I came through, and this is something I want to address as part of a series. Actually, this is going to be the first in a series because I think this series is quite necessary, and I think it's necessary for a Christian to make a series like this rather than always it being atheists that do it. And the series is going to be called Stupid Things Christians Say. And because the fact of the matter is, if it comes from a Christian perspective, then we at least have the biblical understanding in order to address it properly, rather than dishing out straw man arguments, which is what you get with a lot of the atheists, where when they go after Christians and things like that, they're not really coming from a basis of any particular understanding of the Christian faith at all. And then a lot of times, even though their objection might be legitimate, unfortunately their objection doesn't necessarily appeal to a Christian audience, who they are probably trying to convince, because their reasoning isn't founded on the Bible. And it's like, if you're going to go against someone, it's actually better to use their own weapons against them in order to try and show them up. And this is actually what I want to do, because the fact of the matter is, and something that atheists really need to understand, and just anyone that dislikes Christianity for whatever reason, is that a lot of the problems you guys have, we actually have a lot of the same problems with a lot of the stupidity that goes on in our own faith that we often try to battle against, and all these kinds of things. So today we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to give you, if you are any form of detractor against Christianity, I'm actually going to give you a lot of ammo. But also, if you are a Christian and you're sick and tired of hearing other Christians make this kind of argument, this is going to give you a Bible-based bit of ammo to go against this kind of argument. Now, one thing that you hear, and it sometimes comes up in newspapers and stuff like that, you hear where for example, there's a hurricane. I believe I've actually got the article here. I'm going to actually go into the article quickly, just to have a look at it. Can't believe people say stuff like it. It says, gay people to blame for Hurricane Harvey, says evangelical Christian leaders. This actually was back in 2017, and you generally get comments like this and stuff like that whenever there's a hurricane or some sort of a natural disaster and all of these kinds of things. And even I've actually had first-hand experience with someone that I knew that was close to me, that was a Christian, and when the whole incident happened in Fukushima out in Japan, where the idiot actually had the audacity to say, well, that the reason that happens is sort of God's punishment for the way they treat animals, because he had watched some video and this is the thing, the moron couldn't even get the nationality right. He watched a video about some Chinese sort of street food and stuff like that, how the way they cook some of the animals sort of still alive. It's a lot of animal cruelty that goes on. The animal's still alive, and when it actually gets onto your plate, the muscles are still squirming and things like that. So you can sort of understand where there was a real disgust factor here and stuff like that. But the idea that because of their culinary habits and stuff like that, that God is now gonna, I mean, he got the national. It happened in Japan. It had nothing to do with the Chinese. As far as I'm aware, the Japanese don't have a commensurate type of way of doing these kinds of things. I might be wrong, but even let's say for the sake of argument, let's say they did. To think that a nuclear meltdown and a hurricane and earthquake and all that kind of stuff, that's sent by God, is just such a stupid idea. It's unbelievable. Now, where do these Christians actually get off specifically? And I'm addressing this one specifically because they're talking about gay people, right? Because the whole homosexuality thing is a huge topic for debate, and it's the whole LGBT thing. It's actually got to the point of absolute absurdity. Now, let me make my position quite clear. I disagree with LGBT ideology. End of story, flat out. I don't agree with it. I don't support it. I think it's wrong, right? So the fact that I'm going against Christians for making a stupid argument against LGBT people doesn't mean that I'm in favor of their ideology, but it doesn't mean I hate them either. Okay, so let's make that distinction. I'm going against an ideology. Now, So Christians, so where do they get off making these kinds of really, really stupid statements? Well, the fact of the matter is, well, they're Christians, so they get it from the Bible. And specifically the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. So you're going to find that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah actually begins in Genesis 18, right? Where you've got Abraham. And as it turns out, you don't get this from just a plain reading of the text. You've got to read the whole Bible and so on and so forth. You need theology in order to realize, or to get this. But basically, Abraham sees these men, right? And we're going to read it here, right? It's in Genesis chapter 18. And he says here, here we go, right? For I know, right. So he wants to know. So Abraham sees these men, and he invites them because there's a doctrine of hospitality, specifically in the Jewish faith and even in the Christian faith, right? It's a doctrine of hospitality. He sees these men in the desert, he invites them in. Eventually he realizes that it's actually the Lord himself, right? Jesus. So this would be Jesus and two angels, right, with him. So invites him in, there's a bit of a chat and stuff like that, and eventually gets around to the topic of Sodom and Gomorrah. So why exactly is the Lord, or has he met the Lord on this road to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? What is he doing there? Why is he there? So they're sort of setting a backdrop, right? And he's finding, right, well, Jesus now says to him, in verse 20, chapter 18, verse 20, it says, "And the Lord said, because of the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know." Okay, so when Christians are making this kind of argument that it's because of the gays and because of the whatevers, right, that these hurricanes are coming out and destroying all these kinds of things, that this is basically God's punishment because of their sin and all these kinds of things, right? And when we look at the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, your average Christian is thinking of it in a very, very shallow way, right? They go to the part where these men wanted to have sex with the angels, and Lot offered up his daughters instead. So there's this strong sense of sexual depravity in there, and homosexuality, because the men of the town wanted to have sex with the angels, and we know that angels are masculine. They take a masculine form, and when they manifest in a physical form, they take a male physical form, even though they're not actually male. They're not actually gendered in their sort of spiritual natural state, right? So. And also, when you talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, you get the sodomy and so on, and that is something. And interestingly enough, this is that shallow way of thinking. Even though sodomy is something that is prevalent within the homosexual community, not even, because I actually know a lot of gay guys that said anal sex, never. They're not interested in it at all. But generally speaking, it is the domain of homosexual relationships. But also, this kind of stuff exists even in heterosexual circles as well. It's not exclusive, even though it's more prevalent, perhaps. But in heterosexual circles, it exists there as well. So to think that this is specifically only talking about gay people is completely stupid, right? It's totally idiotic. Gay people are included, right? So I apologize for those of you that find this a little bit offensive and stuff like that. Homosexuality is included, but it's not only homosexuality. It's all kinds of stuff, right? All kinds of depravity. And so this is where they're getting the story from. And so God is saying, well, I'm going to destroy these people because of their sins and all these kinds of things. So let's get into the story and see whether a Christian can legitimately make this claim that if a hurricane happens, it's because of the gay people, right? Can they really actually do this? And I'm putting it towards you that the answer is no, and it's biblically substantiated. Why we can't blame all these natural disasters on some sort of divine interventions of punishment because of things like that. Right. So here we see, and this is why the Bible records the conversation between Jesus and Abraham, because it needs to set the backdrop, right? And people don't read this. Okay. So we see, it says here, right? The Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, right? So he's saying, I've heard the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah. I've heard the cry of the people there, or of the people, because God is all knowing and all these kinds of things. And I've received this report, Right? I've received this. This is how he's talking about it. I've received this report. The cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great. So there's obviously there's a lot of suffering going on there, right? And he's being fair about it. So he said, I'm going to go down now and I'm going to see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it. So I'm going to go and double check and I'm going to verify this for myself, right? Which is good of him, yeah? He's all knowing. He doesn't really have to do this, but this is an illustrative thing. You know, that God, it shows that God is involved. He doesn't a lot of Christians like to think that they're favored. Oh, just because I'm a Christian, I can just say something and God's going to do it. It's like, no. Just because you're a Christian, God, he knows the truth of the matter, and the fact that you're a Christian is completely irrelevant. There's the truth of the matter, and if your Christian is applying something in a false way, and God knows the truth of the matter to be otherwise, he's not going to act on behalf of the Christians just because he's a Christian, right? If a Christian asks for something stupid or something evil, God's not going to give it to him, right? That's just, you know, and there's a lot of presumption that goes around with Christians because of this, right? Just because you're a Christian, if you're a Christian in name only, it does you no service whatsoever, right? The bane of our existence is Christians who are actually not Christians. They just claim to be, but they're idiots. But you get that in every religion, unfortunately. And according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know. So I'm going to go and check it out. And the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord, right? So now Abraham, like most people, is having a very, very strong sense of like, wow, you're going to go to destroy an entire city, right? And this is what people don't read in the Bible, right? There's this dialogue here. It's not just, I'm just going to go destroy them and it's just some arbitrary thing, right? So here's this dialogue, right? Abraham has the same knee-jerk reaction that most people would have, right? Which is what most people have to this kind of thing. Flipping hell, right? Go and just burn and just flatten an entire, not just one, two cities, just flatten it just like that. Come on, how can you do that, right? What if there's innocent people there? And this is precisely what Abraham does, right? And Abraham drew near and said, this is verse 23, and said, Will thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked, right? So he knows, you know, no one minds wicked people getting destroyed, right? That's just one of those things, right? If a person's wicked, get rid of him, right? No one minds that. But people have a problem with innocents dying, right? A big problem with innocents dying. The righteous with the wicked. So yeah, okay. Peradventure, so this is old language. I read the King James. I'm not one of those King James only people, but I like it, okay? It's based on the right texts and all that kind of stuff, sort of thing. So I also like Young's literal translation and etc. All right, so I'm not one of those, you know, KJV only, but I like it, right? It does the job. But language is a little bit old, but I like it. Peradventure, there be 50 righteous within the city. Will thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? Okay, so he's basically asking here a question. Of the entire city, between the two of them, right? If there's only 50 righteous people in there, are you still going to destroy it, right? Fair question. Are you going to destroy it? You know, and so Jesus' response: that be far. No. This is still Abraham. Now Abraham is appealing to what he knows about Jesus. He says, "That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous from the wicked." So Abraham understands something over here. It's not in God's nature to kill righteous people, and this is key: to kill righteous people along with evil people. All right, just indiscriminately. It's not in his nature to do it, right? And this is your clue as to whether this is true or not. Whether a Christian can actually make these evangelical idiots can go in and make this kind of statement, right? Here's Abraham himself saying, "Hang on, God, you don't just indiscriminately kill people, whether they're righteous or wicked like that. You don't do that, right?" So here we go. And that the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Yeah, fair enough. If God is righteous, he's going to do what's right. And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the place for their sake. For only 50 people, right? And so now all the way down to verse 31, actually to the verse all the way 32, to verse 32, you see that this conversation carries on where Abraham bargains him down, right? till eventually bottoms out at 50. He's like, if there's even 10 people righteous in that city, will you spare it? And Jesus is like, yeah, I will spare it for the sake of 10 people only, if there's only 10 people righteous. So eventually what happens? At the end it says, and the Lord went his way as soon as he had left communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. Right? And then as soon as you then jump into Genesis 19, you have the two angels now arriving at Sodom. So what does this mean? It means that even that despite Abraham's bargaining with God, right? That the only reason why God was willing to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah is because no righteous people could be found at all. Not even 10, right? No one. And even Lot is not particularly righteous, right? If you actually investigate the whole issue, one of the main reasons why Lot and his family is being spared is in a big part for Abraham's sake, because he's Abraham's nephew, because they're related, and all that sort of thing. And Lot sort of tries to be righteous and is kind of a good guy, but generally he's quite pathetic, and his family is not particularly good either, right? So here we read, now the angels come to Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is why this narrative is taking place. There's no good people. That's why God is destroying the place. None at all. Okay. So how does then this translate? Okay. How does it translate? Let me make another quick point, right? So even Lot himself is not particularly decent guy. He's actually a bit of an idiot, right? So when Lot eventually gets to the point, when we see over here in verse 19, where it says the angels come, and Lot takes them in, right? Again, that principle of hospitality. And then the mob comes because they want to rape these men, right? So now you need to understand the condition of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? In the pagan societies, and when a lot of people make these objections to some of the things in the Bible, why destroy the whole city, right? You need to understand something, that certain things do not happen out in broad daylight without there being a general consensus that certain things are okay, right? For example, let's take homosexuality now in 2018, right? Homosexual people have been given the right to marry. That would not have happened unless there was an overwhelming consensus that this was okay in a particular society, and thus it was granted to them, okay? So nothing can happen without an overwhelming consensus within the society that the perpetrators of a particular thing know that it's going to be accepted or at least excused by the vast majority of the society. So the fact that a mob forms and comes to his door in order to rape these men shows that there is a general consensus in the society that this kind of thing is okay to do, right? We can go basically bang on someone's door and demand to have sex with whoever it is that's in there, and if they don't allow it, you can basically bust their door down. Imagine living in a world like that, right? Now, if you study the old systems, right, the old ancient civilizations, and you see the kind of depravity that used to go on in these kinds of places, right? It's not just sexual problems, right? Sexual issues, right? Like, for example, you had some of like the temple of Aphrodite, or the temple of Zeus, or the temple of Ishtar, whatever the case might be. What you would also have is child prostitutes who would stand at the doors of these temples, right? And would serve as child prostitutes at the doors of these temples. And so there was massive sexual exploitation of minors, sexual exploitation of slaves. There would have been absolute massive corruption. So when we go back, when God says, "I have heard the cry of these people," it means that God is aware that there is that this particular place had become basically unsavable, right? So completely unsavable, with every single form of corruption wholesalely accepted that you could possibly think of, with the most abhorrent practices, and with innocent people basically being destroyed because the society had degenerated to such a point where it was literally the only thing that was left to do was just burn the place down, right? That's why, sort of thing. So when Lot now then offers his, because a lot of people, they're saving Lot. When Lot offers his daughters, right, in order to as compensation for this thing, and people are like, oh, well, what kind of morals is this? It's like, you're right. Lot was an idiot. He was a pathetic little man, right? Lot was not a righteous man, which is why he was living in Sodom in the first place, right? If you get the backstory, Lot wasn't particularly good either. His salvation was for the sake of his association with Abraham, right? So he wasn't safe for any, because he was wonderful. So no one should derive any and a lot of atheists want to do this. Oh, they like to point to Lot. Oh, are women worthless that you can? It's like, no, that's not what the Bible is teaching. That is there to show how pathetic and spineless and idiotic even Lot had become, because he lived in that city. And this is a lesson to Christians, that don't think that you can go and live in the city, because Abraham, when the division of land, if we go earlier on, Abraham and had come out into Canaan, and he said to Lot, where do you want to go and live? And Lot, rather than respect his elder, chose the best land and all the good stuff, right? And Abraham was left with what was left. So from the beginning, we see that Lot is a bit of a pathetic individual, a bit of a useless individual. And it started out where Abraham he continued to live in tents outside of the city, basically in the wilderness, a sort of nomadic sort of lifestyle. He lived outside the city. Lot, if we go back, Lot, not only did he started out living outside of the city, but in the end, now when we get to this point, we see he's now living inside the city, right? And this is a warning to Christians, is watch out. You can't go into certain places thinking that you are not going to be influenced by whatever filth and whatever stupidity that's going on in there, right? And this is a mistake that a lot of Christians make, where we think that we can resist a lot of worldly influences and stuff like that. We can go out there and we're going to evangelize them. Garbage. The world ends up evangelizing you. And that's what it's talking about. And in this particular thing, it's purely by the grace of God and whatever grace that can be found through his connection with his righteous relative Abraham, that Lot is saved. It's not through any merit or anything like that, because remember, there's no righteous people being found. So that settles that issue, right? So what do we garner from this? When Christians actually say, oh, the hurricane is the gay people's fault, can they make that claim? The claim is absolutely no. Because if that hurricane was sent, right? If that hurricane was sent, let's say to the United States, a hurricane comes through and kills people. Based on this story, it is sent because there is no one righteous, not even the Christians. So these Christians are actually saying, without realizing it, is no one is righteous. Even us Christians are a bunch of miserable sods who deserve to die. Because the hurricane is indiscriminate, right? It demolishes, it doesn't just hurt gay people, it hurts Christians, it hurts everybody. It's indiscriminate. It is absolutely, completely indiscriminate. And so this idea that God is sending these natural disasters like hurricanes and things like that, right? These things are a result of, because we now live in a fallen world, of course, right? But these are not direct Sodom and Gomorrah-esque type things where he's like, oh, look at them gay people, I'm going to send a hurricane and I'm just going to indiscriminately demolish the whole thing, because God is not the type to do that sort of thing, right? And we already have this situation now in the Bible where we talk about there's going to be a reckoning in the end, right? And God is allowing people to carry on and realize the final consequences of their actions before the end times come, and then it's all sorted out. So this issue that is now interjecting with a little hurricane here and a little hurricane there and stuff like that is just such a completely idiotic idea. It is unbelievable. And even if that were true, then the hurricane is a warning not only obviously to whoever's committing sin and stuff like that, it's a warning to the Christians, because remember, no one righteous was found in Sodom and Gomorrah. No one. So that means not even the Christians. It means that the Christians are no better than Lot, are no better than the other idiots who are running around there that deserve to be burned, right? It means that no one in the city is actually following God the way Abraham was, in the righteous, proper, decent way, right? And so, without knowing it, the Christians are actually rebuking themselves, right? Because if God is sending a hurricane, it's a rebuke to everyone, even the Christians. So it's like, listen, Christians, you're just as pathetic and as useless, right? Sitting on your little high horses, making these stupid proclamations, which then bring disrepute onto the faith, right? It's like, this is not how I told you right? To go evangelize people. It's like, if you disagree with people, if you disagree with homosexuality and stuff, it's all good and well. But there's a way of going about it, right? You don't go picketing and blaming every bad thing on them, right? Because let me tell you something. Christians are just as pathetic and useless as everybody else, right? We're not magically better as soon as we come out of the baptismal pool at all, right? And so there needs to be a backlash against this kind of Christian stupidity, right? Where we need to start raising the standard within the Christian community, where this kind of nonsense isn't just left to the secular media to ridicule and mock, right? Because it gets nowhere, right? It gets nowhere. And then as Christians, we're sort of looking a little bit stupid, because then the atheists turn around. It's like, listen, right? Why don't you speak to these guys and maybe say, because the atheists and the irreligious, let's put, not just the irreligious in general, they look at this and like, how can you people say stuff like that? They have this instinct that it's wrong, that it's imbecilic, it's idiotic, and they're right. Unfortunately, they don't have the theological vocabulary that we do to say, yeah, it is, and this is why the Christians are wrong, for making these kinds of claims. And it's just completely stupid. So, this was in, I'm gonna put the link below. In the Independent, gay people to blame for Hurricane Harvey, say evangelical Christian leaders. A number of Christian leaders have blamed LGBT people for causing Hurricane Harvey. It's just so imbecilic. Despite overwhelming evidence that supports climate change as a factor in the devastating storm and subsequent flooding, a handful of evangelical leaders have ludicrously suggested the LGBT community are to blame. Now, climate change and all that kind of stuff aside, this claim is completely moronic. It's like, you do not need to appeal even. You don't even need to appeal to any scientific thing at all, right? If you're going to speak to these Christians, speak to them based on their own standard, because that's how you reach people, on their own standard, right? They believe in the Bible. You can actually take the Bible, you can take this argument, and you can go beat the hell out of them, smash them over the head and say, listen, you moron, your Bible does not agree, even your own Bible does not agree with this position, right? Does it disagree with homosexuality? Does the Bible disagree with LGBT? Absolutely, 100%. Does the Bible say that now every natural disaster is because of gay people? No, that's garbage, right? And now, or because of the way people treat animals, or because of whatever little particular little sin that we want to frickin' pick on our cherished little bugbear sin at any particular moment. No, that's not it, right? We live in a fallen world, and we're all sinners, even us Christians, right? We're just as pathetic as we say everyone else is, right? Probably more so, because we should know better, right? We should actually have a higher standard, and yet we carry on like a bunch of fools and bring mockery and ridicule onto the faith. And then we want to say, oh, we're being so victimized and mocked because we are, oh, shame, poor us, the atheists are coming after us and making mockery. Well, don't behave like a bunch of dumbasses, and you're going to be all right. And maybe you'll convince them if you actually live your life in a decent, respectable, and a winsome manner, right? How about that for a notion? Rather than just chirping rubbish the whole time, live a decent life, treat people decently, right? Even gay people, you disagree with them? Yeah, fine, fair enough. We disagree and all that kind of stuff, fair enough. But treat them like human beings still, right? You don't have to agree with a person in order to treat them decently. Right? You can still say homosexuality is a sin. You can say that and still treat the person properly. It's not difficult at all, right? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's my 2 cents. If I look a little bit irritated, it's because I am, because I'm sick and tired of seeing this kind of garbage. Christians post this kind of nonsense, right? Sometimes it's just, I'm sick and tired of it, and I hear this kind of stuff all the time, because obviously I'm in the Christian community, and I'm so sick to death of hearing Christians just come up with absurdities like this. It's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable, right? Anyway, and then those of us that are trying to do a good thing and promote the faith have to constantly contend with, oh, well, what about that stupid little group and then we're like, and then we end up apologizing for them rather than actually spend time preaching the good news and the decent stuff, right? And it's a total waste of time. Yeah. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's my two cents on the matter. Please don't make idiotic arguments like this, right? Or at least go to the Bible and get it right, for heaven's sake. And Dear non-religious people, there's your ammunition. Go use that. We're opposite side of the fence. Yeah, fair enough. But there it is. And if you're gonna deal with these people, it might be painful for you to go read the Bible. But listen, go and actually read the thing before you want to make a comment, because otherwise, you're not going to convince anyone if you make a straw man argument out of the faith. I mean, it's not going to help. Right. Anyway, ta-ta. Thank you very much for participating, and I hope this helps you out. Cheerio. See you later. Bye.